Hello there, Tech Alley Conference. I'm Hidde, and I'm joining you today from Rotterdam, the Netherlands, to talk about whether accessibility problems could be automatically fixed by browsers. This is something I'm really interested in. I have a bit of a background in accessibility, having worked as an accessibility consultant for many years. In the last 3 years, worked at the World Wide Web Consortium on accessibility. And I'm really excited about finding ways to make the web more accessible for end users. And I think one of the things that we really should be exploring is whether browsers could actually help with that. So my question for today is, could browsers fix more of our accessibility problems automatically? Now, of course, a lot of accessibility problems are fixed because the accessibility community does a lot of outreach. Like, there are a lot of websites out there that can help you make your site more accessible. There's a lot of outreach there, and that is awesome. But one thing I've noted is that there are a lot of websites that aren't affected by that. It could be that they don't have a team kind of assigned to the website at that time. There could be that there's not even an organization behind the website. Like in my hobby website about Harry Potter, something like that might have inaccessible content that no one's aware of and no one is tasked with fixing. And the good news is that we can actually detect some problems automatically. An interesting group in that regard is ACT Rules, which is a group at the W3C, a task force that is part of the Accessibility Guidelines Working Group, which makes the WCAG guidelines, among others. Now, this group looks at, can we potentially write WCAG as test rules so that we can use them in our test engines? Because many of the people in the group build test engines like X and Microsoft Accessibility Insights, SiteImprove, those sorts of tools that you can run on a website that can tell you something about their accessibility. Now, we know that although we can automatically detect issues, it's only a small subset of them. But if we can, that did make me think, can we actually also automatically fix some of those issues? And again, this is a small subset of issues and probably an even smaller subset that can be automatically fixed. But still, I think that's a worthwhile thing to explore. As I mentioned before, it doesn't really relieve websites from their responsibility. It's not a get out of jail free card at all. I imagine this as a separate path to, organizations need to get their accessibility right. It's the right thing to do. They often have to by, there's lots of laws and so forth and so forth. So lots of reasons for organizations to get their accessibility right. But if they don't, I think browsers can, as a separate path, also fix some issues when they're able to. So with some caveats in mind, would we be able to fix some problems automatically? I want to look at a couple of things today that I think could be examples of what browsers could do and what browsers could help with. I'll imagine them as checkboxes, not because I think that's the best UI for them, but just because I think the ultimate implementation is much better done by actual browser engineers and designers. So bear with me, these are just examples. Some of them you will find in some browsers and others are new and haven't been picked up by any of the browsers. So let's look at a couple of examples of things that browsers could potentially do. The first one I want to look at is force readability. So what if we had a checkbox that would let us force readability on any given website? There are websites that put very light grey text on a grey background, making it really hard to read, that don't do any line lengths, that don't organize their typography properly. What if you could just force readability upon that? A checkbox like that would just kind of reformat the text and make it look pretty and readable. Now, this is actually something that already exists in some browsers. Firefox has got an excellent reading mode. Edge has a reading mode as well. They will let you switch to dark mode. They will let you choose colors that work better for you. Some of them will also let you adjust fonts. So there's a lot of customization options available, which is really helpful for users with a wide range of disabilities, including users with dyslexia, users with attention deficit disorders, and all those sorts of things. Another thing that I find in a lot of websites when I do audits is contrast problems. So problems with the foreground and the background color that don't have sufficient contrast. Now, this happens often when a website has like a header photo with some text on top of it, and it will create bad contrast, but it happens in many, many different places. In fact, it's quite widespread on the web. As WebAIM, they found that 86.4% of websites actually had contrast problems. And I think the solution could be quite simple. Maybe not pretty in a design sense, but simple. If you have white text and doesn't have enough color in the background, not sufficient contrast, what you could do is just draw a black backplate just right behind it. That's going to give it the contrast it needs. It might not be very pretty, and the designer of this page might not be so happy that this happens, but for an end user it's pretty much what they need in order to access this content. Now there is actually a browser plugin built by the people behind the Polypane browser for web developers, and this plugin called Fix Contrast allows you to give them a number, like a contrast number that you want to have, and then it's going to update every website that you go to and tweak the colors until they have sufficient contrast. So that gray text would just be made a little bit darker or a little bit lighter depending on what is needed. Now this is a way that kind of browsers or plugins could intervene when something like this happens and when there is a accessibility problem. Now let's look at focus indication, another quite common problem. One of the 50 WCAG criteria on A and AA level, and it's something that frankly a lot of websites don't get right. So if you have a bit of text that has some links in it, the way to know which link you're currently on is by looking at the focus indication. So I'm currently on a link called Approaches, and when I go and press my tab key, I will go to the link Empowerment. And then when I press tab again, I'll go to that button underneath, and I can also go back to kind of that first link. Yeah, this is navigating around the page with just my keyboard, and the border allows me to know where I am. You might know this pattern from using a TV without a mouse or any kind of interface that doesn't have a mouse. This is important, but many websites turn it off, and I think that could be easily-ish fixed by a browser just overriding that behavior when users want to. So when they check that checkbox, give them the opportunity to actually indicate focus always. And this is something that Chrome has recently added through their accessibility settings. You can actually say, I want to have a quick highlight on the focused object and make that work. Another feature that I think could be really helpful is navigate by landmark, because often users might want to go to specific parts of the page, and landmark navigation can help them a lot with that. It can make it easier for people to efficiently jump to specific parts of a web page, and currently that can only be done using certain assistive technologies. A browser could actually expose landmarks that exist in the browser code. So someone could use HTML to define what the different areas are on a web page. Like on this page of The Guardian, could say, well, there's a main navigation, a subjects navigation, and a support navigation. That's three of them. Here is a way to navigate quickly to them. And then there's a bunch of different sections like main article, most viewed, related articles. And again, it would provide links to those specific sections to go directly to those parts of the page. So that's something that a browser could actually expose, making it easier for people who are not using assistive tech to jump to the part of the page that they actually want to go to. This might make you think, should browsers do more? Should they do more than kind of the obvious, like highlighting focus or exposing landmarks or fixing contrast? I think they could do a couple of things, like Safari guesses accessible names, which is a big problem, like when form fields aren't indicated what their name is, but they do have some visual label. Sometimes Safari will say, well, then that's probably the name for that input. It could maybe guess what headings are, like looking at all paragraphs that are just one line and end in a period, maybe they're headings. Or maybe a browser could look at the button roll as a hint to figure out that something needs to be activatable with just a keyboard. Maybe sequences of strings that start with a bullet or numbers, maybe they are lists. So there could be heuristics built into browsers that try to recognize certain things that developers have not added and that is still important for users with disabilities to get access to. So basically, with caveats in mind, I think browsers could do more to fix accessibility problems automatically. There's a bunch of things that we can detect, and I think some of them are actually fixable in browsers. And others might be more experimental, but still interesting to look at. Now, there's a community group I just wanted to plug called Accessibility Features Community Group, and I started with a bunch of friends. Feel free to join that. We are currently paused, but we are looking to restart this group in the next year. So if you're interested in this sort of thing, feel free to join us. And with that, I want to thank you very much for listening. My name was Hidde. I am available on Twitter at HDV, and I will be tweeting out these slides later on as well.